of my favorite things in games is when you lose track of time. You start playing a game and you don't realize how much time has passed. But in order for that to happen, players need to be paying attention. They need to be interested. You kind of always need to have them questioning what's going to happen next, right? So today I want to talk about different ways in which we can get players' attention and keep it. Let's start out with pacing. I think pacing is really interesting. Pacing to me means it's the rhythm of the game, right? Because every game is going to have tension and release of tension. And throughout the game, you're going to the tension will go up and then it's going to be released and it'll go up and it's going to be released. And that's going to form kind of the pace of the game. How often does stuff happen? If we take a simple example, let's say we have a trivia game and somebody asks you a question, you answer it, the tension is really high, and then they tell you were correct or you weren't correct, and that resolves the tension. If we weren't going to resolve that tension, if somebody just asks you a question, you answer it, and then they don't tell you if you're right or wrong, well then there's no release, right? And we need some form of release. But the rhythm isn't always going to look like this. It's just more interesting when you have kind of bigger swings and then small swings, and then you build up and then you have a bigger swing and small swings and so on. Or sometimes you'll have tension, release, and then even more tension, release, and then even more tension, release. And for example, let's say we take the trivia game. Well, what happens in Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? It's the same thing. They ask a question and they get a response. But every time they raise the stakes, right? So the first question is for $1. It's easy, you answer it. The next question, a little bit harder, it's for $5. The tension is higher. Then it's for $10 and so on. And that keeps you more invested, right? Because you still have that tension. You don't get used to just like one flat level of tension, and you feel kind of progress. There's also a little bit of push your luck. Like, should I go for the next question because I already have this much? One thing you can ask when you have a game, just find where the tension is. Like maybe if you're working on a worker placement game, maybe the tension is between your turn. It's not even on your turn because I know where I want to go, but is somebody else going to go to that spot and block me? That's the tension. And then my turn comes and release. Now I have the information, I know what went on, and it's my turn. If we take a game like The Mind, if you know about The Mind, it's a very simple game. It's one of my favorites. Players have a deck of cards that ranges in numbers from 1 to 100. You give players out a certain number of cards, and what they need to do without communicating, which is the twist, is they need to play them from lowest to highest. So what naturally builds is actually time in the game becomes the mechanic. Because if I have a 1, I want to immediately play it, right? Because I know that nobody else has a lower number. Or if you have a number that's, let's say, below 20, you know you're going to play it fairly quickly. But then it's called The Mind because your game is going to synchronize because players are going to start learning what each other's timing is. Another way to keep players' attention is by giving them a sense of progress. And progress can mean that as they keep playing, the game kind of grows with them, right? So they become stronger. Maybe they have like more options than they did in the beginning of the game. If you have a shorter game, you don't necessarily even need to be progressing, but progress is a tool you can use. And nowadays, like with legacy games or campaign games where you play multiple games, even simple games can give you a sense of progress from game to game. So maybe the game itself is a 5-minute game, but then you have a feeling of progress because that unlocks your next level. For instance, The Crew, which we talked about in one of the earlier videos, each game takes about 5 minutes, but when you finish it, it still gives you a sense of progress because then you have the next level. So it's just, they've built in that sense of progress, of going through levels, and that keeps players' attention, right? When we first got The Crew with our group, we didn't just play 1 or 2 games. We played it for about 4 hours because they're super snappy, but then you want to see what's the next thing, right? What's the new thing that's going to happen in the next scenario? And that way, you can keep players' attention for a much longer time. All right, and the last thing I want to talk about when it comes to attention is player motivation. So how do we keep players motivated in our games, and what are they motivated to do? Obviously, you can use rewards or punishments. Another thing you can do is have players have anticipation. Have them keep anticipating what's going to happen next. Like in movies, for instance, you'll have a scene where they talk about what is going to happen next, and that immediately tells the viewer, oh, I wonder how that's going to go, right? Like you'll have a main character who says, I'm going to ask her to marry me at 5 p.m. And then we have a lot of other scenes, but in viewers' minds, they're thinking, what's going to happen? Is he going to ask her to marry him? What's she going to say? Is she going to say yes? So if we can get players anticipating what's going to happen next, then you'll have players' attentions. My favorite example in games for anticipation is the Disneyland castle. If you haven't been to Disneyland, a lot of game designers have worked at Disneyland, and the Disneyland castle is kind of known as a metaphor for having something that players can see from any point in the game, and they can always be working towards it. So if we have like Dune Imperium is one of my favorite games, and in Dune Imperium what you have is you have from the very beginning an always available card which costs you 10 influence. 10 influence is a lot. You can't buy it from early on, but seeing that card from the beginning can tell you, okay, what do I want to do? Well, I see this big unattainable thing. Maybe I should start working towards getting to 10 influence and being able to buy that card. So sometimes you can signal to players, hey, there's something that you can always be working on, and if you don't know what to do, you can just work on that. When it comes to attention, after a playtest, ask yourself, where does your game create tension? Does it take too long to create that tension? Is it constantly tense without resolution? Ask yourself, does the game evolve over time? So do players start and end with the same options, or do players build up during the game? And is that difference big? And sometimes what you'll want to do is you'll want to have players start off in a much worse position. If you have a look at any deck building game, you start with a deck that has really bad cards. But that makes it all the more exciting when you get those good cards in your hand, and when you get to discard those bad cards and kind of upgrade your deck. Another question to ask is, what keeps players emotionally invested? What are they looking forward to, and what are they anticipating? Do players wish they had one more turn? Typically, you want to end your game when it's the most exciting. You want to end it on a high note, and you want players to finish the game and wish they had one more turn. Because the worst thing you can hear about a game is, I wish it was one turn less. If you have a choice, try cutting it earlier. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Ivan Alexiev, and you can reach out to me at playerlayer.net.